Best place to start would just be a kind of general overview of Western Marxism and its fundamental orientation, because Western Marxism, isn't equivalent to Marxism in the West. It is instead a very specific perversion of the history of the Marxist tradition that has occurred within the imperial core, meaning, Western Europe as the historical center of the imperial core, but then the United States became the leading imperialist power in the wake of World War II and has promoted these theoretical trends very strongly. It's generally affiliated with the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, of course, people like Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, but then also the left wing of French theory. So Michel Foucault, Gilles Deleuze, Lyotard, other figures along these lines. But it is more capacious than that because there's a lot of Anglophone Marxist theory produced and promulgated within the imperial core that follows similar line. So Perry Anderson, Stuart Hall, Slavoj Žižek, many other figures could be included within this overall tradition. And I think that this one of the core features of Western Marxism is its investment in the primacy of theory instead of the primacy of practice, meaning that it is keyed more to exchange value within the academy than use value for working class struggles. Anyone who's actually from the working class or involved in organizing, who's tried to read books by, Etienne Balibar or Alain Badiou or people like this, knows full well that they're pitching to a very high intellectual crowd within the academy and less interested in developing theories that have use value for working people and working class struggles. In other words, Western Marxism is largely an academic form of Marxism, and its single most important feature is its anti-communism. It is opposed, with only a few explainable exceptions, to the form of Marxism that has given birth to real-world projects of socialist state building. So in this regard, its criticisms of capitalism, which are often quite truculent, pale in comparison to its unswerving condemnation in sometimes the most categorical of terms of actually existing socialism and communism in the real world. Badiou is that way, Žižek is that way, Michael Hart and Antonio Negri. I could cite, passages where they say this very, very explicitly. What this means then is that for them, there's no concrete practical alternative to the real world of capitalism. And so ultimately, even though they're critical of capitalism, they're at the end of the day accommodationist, meaning they accommodate capitalism, perhaps grudgingly, because there's no real world alternative. From my own vantage point, I think that Western Marxism needs to be understood and analyzed from a materialist perspective. It's not simply the autonomous thought of individuals or a particular theoretical orientation that occurred as if by accident in the Western world. Instead, it's an ideological outgrowth of the imperial superstructure, meaning the fundamental institutions of knowledge production, distribution, and consumption that dominate the imperial world is one that has fostered this precise form of Marxism. What this means is that the way in which I think we should approach Western Marxism is as an ideology that's ultimately driven by the socioeconomic base. It's a product of the imperial superstructure, a product of the imperial cultural apparatus, meaning this entire system of cultural production, distribution, and consumption, rather than being some idiosyncratic, accidental, or individual creation. So we also have to look at it collectively, right? A lot of the bourgeois humanities in particular tend to approach philosophic work based on a kind of fetishization of individual producers at the expense of an analysis of the system that produced the producers themselves. So in my own work, I've been very engaged in a political economy of knowledge production that examines why and how these forms of Marxism were both produced and then very widely disseminated, both within the imperial core and through cultural imperialism, projected around the world as the most advanced, cutting-edge form of Marxism to date.